We're going to be quite short because we want to move to the vote because we have our own amendment to the amendment. We obviously have a very different opinion to this. Our opinion is that on the 5th of March we all came together and we made some important decisions. We decided we would move to all-out elections, and about half of the members here supported that. And we also decided that we would instigate a boundary review for the 2016 local elections, and every member present supported that. Now, since then, suddenly, other groups seem to have encountered problems with supporting that. Problems to support putting in an application for a boundary review. It is not the boundary review itself, it is an application to have one. And let's have a think about what's the effect of not doing this in time. The effect of not doing this in time, not getting an application by the end of the month. We're talking about writing an application here, 30 or 40 pages of, well, good argument, but we've got those good arguments. We technically automatically trigger a boundary review as it is because of Cabot Ward. What is the effect? The effect is Lawrence Hill Ward. Unfortunately, the two members for Lawrence Hill aren't here. I think they should be, really, given the importance to their ward. But Lawrence Hill Ward, in 6 years' time, Lawrence Hill Ward will actually be twice the size of some other wards. So that doesn't just mean that the electors there actually find their vote is technically worth half that of some other electors in Bristol. It also means they have councillors with twice the workload. That's not fair. In fact, it was already talked about for when Alderman Bugle was being presented here to the Chamber about the difficulty in representing Lawrence Hill Ward, the demands, the size, the complexity. Yet, here we are, we're just going to abandon the boundary review. We're not against the boundary review. We want the boundary review. We want the boundary review we all agreed to on the March the 5th. We all promised the electorate of Bristol we would do. We all promised each other. As far as I said, that was a binding promise, one where we put our faith in what you were saying was true. I'm afraid we're very disappointed today. So we will move that we actually submit that review. Anyway, I think actually what we best do is move to the vote so we can get to our amendment. Councillor Wright.
Otherwise, yeah. I mean, I'll speak now rather than in our amendment because I think it's more appropriate now, actually. I mean, I want all the members in the chamber to be perfectly aware of what they're voting for here. Voting for this amendment is a vote to miss the deadline, which is a vote to delay the boundary review until 2020. Okay, that's 7 years away, when we already have a ward, mine and Alex's ward, which is over the trigger limit for size, for being too far away from the average size of wards in this city. Now, the disagreement that we've had raised is only around our requirement to suggest a number to the boundary review. We do not need to suggest at this stage the configuration of the wards that we want, the number of councillors per wards that we want. All that we need to suggest to the boundary review at this stage is that we want one and what our suggested number of councillors is. Now, fortunately for us, this work has already been done recently, twice in fact, in reasonable memory. It was done when this council was created out of Avon, and then it was done just a few years later at the end of the 90s when there was another boundary review that ended up in creating Clifton. Now, when those boundary reviews went through and that work was done, in the beginning it was decided that this council should have 68 members, a perfectly reasonable number. At a later date, 2 were added, and then at a later date, 1 has been added. But nothing substantial in this council or this city has changed in that time. The arrival of the mayor, I'm sure we would all agree, has not changed our workloads one bit. If anything, it's made my workload, it seems, slightly higher because suddenly people are interested in politics and they're all contacting me about stuff. So that work that was done still exists, it's still on the shelf, it's still relevant. The number 68 is still the base number that we would expect to come through. And so we can say to the boundary review, we would expect to see a number in the mid-60s, as we have concluded both the previous times we've done this. That's all we need to suggest to them. We don't need any extra information, and we are quite capable of doing that by May the 31st. And so we've got this situation now where Cabot, for example, already has over 8,000 front doors. There are other wards in the city with just over 4,000 front doors. And look at the numbers in 2020 on page 108. And these are projected, for Lawrence Hill, 16,400 residents, for Cabot, 15,600 residents. Those will be twice the size of other wards in the city. And that's only if the current rate of under-registration in Cabot and Lawrence Hill doesn't improve, because both those wards and Ashley suffer from chronic under-registration. There are actually more eligible people to vote in those wards than are registered. The true numbers are even worse than that. It's just that we can't get them signed up. So we need to be perfectly clear what this chamber is doing. It's voting. If you vote for this amendment, you're voting to delay the boundary review to 2020. You're voting to disenfranchise relatively the residents of the inner city wards, Cabot, Lawrence Hill and Ashley, the wards which have high numbers of poor people and ethnic minorities, exactly the people who need a strong voice to speak up for them, a strong voice in this council chamber. You will be voting to give them half the voice in this council chamber if you vote for this amendment. And I think, to be perfectly clear, if you vote for this amendment, and if you don't vote for simply telling the Boundary Commission we think that we should have about 65 to 68-ish councillors, you should be pretty ashamed of yourselves for that. And you will be reminded by me and Alex and others constantly that it was you that disenfranchised those people.
Councillor Hopkins.
It wasn't that many months ago when the Labour Party and the Conservative Party frantically said that we've got to have all-up elections in 2013. It was such a rush. It had. Oh yes, you did, Peter. There was a division within this council on that issue, and we said we were happy to wait to go for, in general, although certain reservations from a number of our members, to go for all-up elections, but it wasn't practical. We had to do it right. We had to do it in 2016 so that it actually fitted in with the new electoral arrangements and with the new cycle. And that's eventually, when it came back to committee, that's what was agreed, and that's what the public told us as well. It made sense to do them together. And I notice now exactly the same people are actually saying, hang on, no, we want to put it into long grass, and it don't get much longer than 2020. And let's face it, the nonsense that we've actually had about the detailed presentation is absolute nonsense. It's an excuse. We do not have to put the full presentation in. We have to give an indication of the headlines. That's all we have to do. I was there at the first meeting that we actually had with the representative of the Electoral Commission, and it was very clear indeed. I think that this council and anybody who votes for it to deny a proper electoral review of the situation ought to be ashamed of themselves. We might well have variable wards. I think it makes sense in actual fact to look at 68 because however you configure the 1, 2, 3s and 4s, if we have 68 that divides by 4, and we've got to take that into so we don't have split wards with regard to the parliamentary constituency, so there's an awful lot of sense in that. I seem to remember earlier on the Mayor actually talking about us having a fairness commission. That's one of the new commissions that we're actually going to have. This Fairness Commission, one of the first things it ought to look at is how people are actually represented. And if we're in a position where one of the first things that we actually do is say to the ethnic minorities that are far overrepresented in the city centre that you're going to have less of a vote yourself, you're only going to have half the vote of some people who live in the periphery, then that is an absolute disgrace. And I despair if the Labour Party are prepared to put up with that for political shenanigans. I ask the Mayor But if we're in a position where there's disagreement on this, that he takes this matter forward on behalf of the city, and that we stick to our word and say what we all agreed in this council not that many weeks ago. Thank you.
Can I move the amendment quickly then? That's the point.
I have two minutes to make.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. You'll have before you a very brief amendment. It's an amendment to the amendment which is now the substantive. It's just that we submit a boundary review by May 2013. We have heard many of the arguments. I've got to be honest, I think some people are on a different planet to myself. The boundary review itself is a massive public consultation process in which the public are engaged. We have been talking about a simple measure to engage a boundary review for this city, something which is drastically needed, well overdue. I think it's shocking that parties have argued against that. And let's be honest, what they're arguing for is no boundary review. Because we've been here before. Last year we were here and we heard the exact same arguments to the other parties. No, we don't need a boundary review. No, we need to rush to all-out elections. Then what happens? Oh, we don't need to rush to all-out elections. But we'll let you have your boundary review, and then suddenly when they get their all-out elections, no, we don't need to rush to the boundary review. It's the same old rubbish pulled out time and time again, and it's the people of Bristol that will remember this. It is your electorate that will remember this. I move the amendment.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Seconded, Lord Mayor. And I, for one, was not fooled by the promise of the electoral review the last time.
We're taking vote. Please use your handset. I declare the motion fallen. Substantive